Welcome to readers of AU Manufacturing News and members of the Australian Manufacturing Forum LinkedIn group. I'm Peter Roberts, your host today for our latest webinar, Your Digitisation Journey. Every company has different needs, different capabilities, and a different digitisation journey. And we'll hear some of those stories today. Shortly, I'll moderate a live roundtable discussion of 3 leading Australian manufacturing CEOs to understand their aims, their achievements, what went right and what went wrong. The webinar will be available online at AU Manufacturing after the event if you want to share it with colleagues. But first, I want to introduce our sponsor, SoftLabs Enterprise Software, whose support made this event possible. SoftLabs is an Australian company that's developed its own ERP software to suit the needs of Australian SMEs, as well as integrating software from industry leaders such as Epicor. Joining us today is Rade Bogdanovic, SoftLabs Director, Products and Solutions. Rade will sum up the discussion today at the end of the session, so stay online for that. But Rade, tell us a little bit about SoftLabs and what you hope to get out of today.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning, everyone. And firstly, I'd really like to thank you, Peter, and AU Manufacturing for this fantastic opportunity to join today's webinar on digital transformation. Secondly, I'm truly honored to be part of this panel and to hear from these experienced executives who will be sharing their insights, into the digital journey their organizations have embarked on. So as Peter introduced, I'm Rade Bogdanovic. I serve as Director of Products and Solutions at SoftLabs. SoftLabs is a 32-year-old Australian technology system integrator with over 50 highly skilled and experienced professionals. We're based in Sydney. We have presence in Queensland, Victoria, Western Australia, New Zealand. And our primary focus are a few select markets where manufacturing plays very significant parts of our targets, markets. The strategic partnership that Peter mentioned we have with Epicor is definitely opened the doors for us to see even further and deeper into manufacturing world and understand the challenges they are faced with across Australia and New Zealand. From my side, through about 28 years of my career, I had the privilege to work with some large organizations like IBM, Unisys, Sun Microsystems, Epicor, and so forth, and worked across Africa, EMEA, and since 10, 11 years ago here in APJ, based out of Sydney. During this time, I was definitely witnessing lots of digital transformation with many of my customers. And I'm very, very keen to hear today about real-life experiences from the execs and from this distinguished panel that we will be seeing and discussing today. So with that, I'd like to hand it back to Peter, and I'm really looking forward to a very insightful, engaging session today. Thank you.
Thank you, Rade. Now let me introduce our 3 panelists. The first of our manufacturing leaders is Christopher Janssen, Managing Director of GPC Electronics in Sydney. GPC is Australia's largest electronics manufacturer, employing 500 at factories in Penrith in Sydney, New Zealand, and China. Next is Vanessa Katsanevakis, Director of Sussex Taps. Since taking over her father's firm, Vanessa and husband George have grown Sussex to become one of Australia's leading tapware brands. Of course, being local, Sussex has the advantage of quick response to the market that all manufacturers enjoy. Vanessa has added the focus of design, sales, and marketing to the business. Our third CEO is Ty Hermans, the Managing Director of Venlo Holdings and Evolve Group. Ty heads a fast-growing group of Queensland companies. He doesn't describe himself as a manufacturer. He used to contract artwork to other manufacturers until he was offered the chance to buy their business. Today, he manufactures a wide range of products, including off-road equipment, recycled plastic, swimming pool equipment, and this is my favorite, plungy, precast, prefabricated concrete swimming pools. Ty, I'd like to turn to you first. Ty, you took over the first manufacturing company, your first manufacturing company in 2014. What did you find there?
I guess in the context of digitisation, we found very little digitisation. So, we weren't from a manufacturing background, but we had the experience of outsourcing our manufacturing to a bunch of different companies all over the world. And I guess that's what we tapped into very quickly to understand, what are the key levers that really good manufacturers all over the place had sort of brought into their businesses to improve their business and their efficiencies. But from a digitisation perspective, they had an old ERP system that was 20 plus years old that wasn't being utilised. All of the machine centres were, on a big whiteboard with magnets with the name of the job number and the machine centre, and literally one guy's job in planning was to move these magnets across the board. So that's how analog that business was when we sort of first walked in.
So how did you go about digitizing the business?
Yeah, look, a couple of the things really critically. Obviously, there was automation. There was bringing robotics and other things like that, and some lean manufacturing processes into the business. They were key takeaways from some of the guys we spoke to. Good friends of mine that had run manufacturing businesses for generations. But a real key thing was that sort of central point of truth. So bringing in a really good ERP and MRP system, and trying to bring that sort of central point of truth into the business. And then obviously the flow down to the factory floor and getting live feedback from the machines and the outputs of the machines back into that same ERP. So that was one of the really key things that we did right at the start.
But you're not a techie yourself. How did you educate yourself?
Yeah, that's an understatement. I'm definitely not a techie. Look, we went and saw them. We went to a bunch of the big plastics and plastics manufacturing trade shows over a 12-month period. Spoke to all the different service providers, but really importantly went to other manufacturers. So through my sort of network of friends that had been supplying us for a long time, got them to introduce us to other people that they saw as being leaders in the industry, and literally went and saw their plants and understood how different pieces of digitisation, holistically had sort of helped or hindered their business. And that was a really critical part too, because there was plenty of examples where people had gone too far and bitten off too much, and it had actually wasn't an improvement. It was actually something that really held them back. So trying to find that sweet spot was really key.
When we talked before, you made a point about making technology fit your business, or making your business fit the technology. Could you explain what you were talking about then?
Yeah, and this is my personal opinion, but there's the history is littered with companies that have had failed ERP or MRP implementations or digitisation implementations. So that was something we were very keen to avoid for two reasons. One, we didn't have a whole lot of money, and we couldn't afford both the monetary disruption, but also just the disruption to the business. So what we went hunting for, and I guess one of the key risks that we identified was, one, we weren't from a manufacturing background. Two, we had a business that was incredibly analog that we're going to take on a massive change piece. So what we wanted to find was an ERP, MRP, central point of truth, a system that we could step up into. Not that they were going to digitize all of our mistakes and all the things that we were doing poorly. And that was one of the things when we went through a bunch of different scoping sessions with, including, government paid for scoping sessions. There was a whole bunch of questions around what we were doing. And I was coming from the point of, I don't care what we've been doing. I want to know what we should be doing. So, I didn't want to just digitize our current, mistakes and poor processes into a system. So we wanted to go for a more rigid system that was going to make sure that our implementation was smooth, effective, efficient. We went live. We didn't run systems in parallel. We spent a 4-month scoping session getting it right, getting all the planning right, and we went live and we never looked back.
So you've been on a bit of a takeover spree in recent years. You've bought a number of businesses and entered new fields on your own behalf. Do all your companies have the same system now? No,
and I wish it was the case. Some of these have gone really well. Some of them gone very, very poorly. One of those, I think, because we also work in such different industries, the system that's going to work great for a plastic injection molding and tool making facility isn't necessarily going to work well for a precast concrete facility. And that's something, we're 10 years on now, and we're nearly 10 years on. We're starting to revisit the types of systems we should be looking for, because ultimately we would like to have one system across all businesses. which is challenging in its own right, because some of our businesses are just, I shouldn't just, but they buy finished product from other manufacturers, and they ship those goods, around the country and overseas. So again, a company that's just moving boxes necessarily, and a sales marketing company doesn't necessarily need the same system as a complex injection molding facility. So trying to find that sweet spot's not easy.
So you're on a journey now. You've not got to the end. You wouldn't call yourselves a digitized business then?
No, absolutely not. And I think a really key thing for us too is finding that right, that sort of the right thing for the business at the right time, and the different businesses too. Like we've done some work in plunging in particular, which was driven by COVID, and that was a lot of digitisation, and that's sort of formed because we've done that so early in Plungy's life cycle. That's now informing decisions we're making around our new facility as well, which will be a far more digitised business than some of the others.
Thanks, Ty. I'd like to turn now to Vanessa Katsanevakis of Sussex Taps. Vanessa, you grew up in your father's business and took it over in 2011. Was the business digital then?
It certainly wasn't, Peter. So Sussex Taps was started 25 years ago now. So it was off the back of a tool making, jewelry, watchmaking, and then Sussex Taps was born. So as far as manufacturing businesses go, we're very young in the piece, and it was far from digital. So thinking back now, when I was first starting in the business, there was a lot of paperwork, a lot of Excel sheets, a lot of sort of mainstream accounting software, and looking at it today, we've come such a long way, but there's still so much to do. So it's always a journey, but and a learning curve as well.
You and your husband George are in the business together now, and I know you had to think about taking over in the first place. But how did you divide your roles up in terms of digitization?
Yes, look, my husband George wasn't in the business at the time. My dad passed on, and that I inherited the business. But so he had an IT background, which was super handy, and mine was more in business, but my passion is more in marketing. And so we said, right, the business wasn't doing great at that point in time. It was post the GFC, and Australian-made products weren't really desirable the way they're perceived 12 years on. So it was that point of sticking to our values and saying, no, we'd never go overseas to make our products. We're going to make it here. And, rolling up our sleeves, getting out on that factory floor, and making slow and incremental improvements to the business. So things such as our barcoding system, implementing our ERP system about 6 years ago, which was a custom one, which has helped us just to keep building on in different departments through vertical electronic digital storage systems that we have, and keep building on that to keep getting that visibility and that real-time data.
So how far on your journey are you? Are you highly digitized?
I'd say we are 70% of the way there, and as things evolve, there's always more to be done, so that shift and focus keeps changing. So there's always more to be done, but every step we do, every investment we do, it's always, we look at the best possible technology that we can get to keep moving in that direction.
Now, you mentioned to me about assembly workstations and the operators there, and how their job has changed in terms of digital instructions and so on. Could you describe that?
Absolutely, yeah. So each workstation has its own iPad or computer, and therefore they can draw on the CAD drawings on how all the components of that tapware product, as well as scanning in whenever there's a work order that comes through, because it's such a long process from a raw bar of brass all the way through to that finished box good. So at any point throughout the business, we can scan in and out that work order. So we have that real-time analytics over what stock we have available, Peter. So that's been such a help in terms of planning, lead times, and updating customers as well. That's all automatic. Orders received, when an order's being dispatched. If there's a delay on an order, it's all about getting that information to the customers as soon as we can, as soon as we know it, which we didn't have that visibility before. It's
great to hear of such a complex, small company, Vanessa, and you've done a lot, obviously. One of the things I was fascinated to hear about was your digital parts storage system. Could you describe that?
Yeah, sure. So look, we kept running out of space, Peter, which is a fantastic problem to have. So Dad would buy the next factory and then the next factory, and 4 factories on, we're like, okay, we're going to solve this problem because the pallet storage that we were using just wasn't working. So some amazing German machine technology, which is the Hermans storage system, which allows us to vertically stock all of our product up to the roof. So I think we've got about 12 of those throughout our factories now. And not only that, it helps, obviously all the data's there, but we can place stock in any of the handles, and then we can then call it up and we'll know exactly where it is off our handheld, off the handheld system. But also it compresses everything. So we're just maximizing space, maximizing efficiency. There's no forklifts driving around the factory trying to find and bring down a pallet because there's so many components across various stages of stock in our business.
Now, Vanessa, I know you're interested in marketing and sales, but I'll get to that just a little bit later. But I wanted to talk about your product design and the manufacturing quality of the products, which I can see in the background. So obviously, product design is critical to you. How does technology inform that product design? And tell us a little bit about the surface coating technology you use as well, please.
Yes, of course. We always design to the best. My dad was Dutch, so the Northern Europeans, they know how to make a product and they make it to last a lifetime. So every piece of machinery that Dad bought, he always bought the best, and we've continued that. That's part of our DNA at Sussex. So we've just invested in our state-of-the-art aerospace technology, really. It's called a PVD facility. It's been around for years, and every iPhone will be coated by the same PVD technology that we have in our factory. And what that does is it ensures longevity and strength in the coating process. And again, that technology from anywhere in the world, we can troubleshoot diagnostics if there's an issue, and we can look at what's happening in real time to that technology. It's also carbon neutral. So everything we can do, we keep trying to be as forward thinking as we can. But yeah, that's our latest addition.
So I'm hearing the story about a very, very technology savvy company, but also one that's looking very much at the product in the hands of the customer. I understand that you might have robots, but you still do hand polishing. How do you decide which is done manually?
Yes, it's all about that balance between hand and man and machine, as we call it. But some products need that personal human touch to finish that off, whereas the bulk parts can go on our robotic machinery, our robotic polishing, which works 24 hours a day and happily chugs along. So it's that fine balance with our product to utilize the best of both worlds, right? Because there is still that place for that hand detailed human approach. So that's where we try to find the balance and getting the economics right as well.
Thanks, Vanessa. I'd like to turn now to Christopher Janssen of GPC Electronics. Chris, you've been a contract manufacturer for 38 years, and in fact, we've known each other for nearly that time, I think. How and when did you get into digitization in the first place?
Well, I think it's interesting. Electronics is a very different industry in many ways than some of the others. I mean, I have a background through family company too, with tool rooms and manufacturing. But in electronics, there's always been an integration of components from semiconductors onwards. And so when we started last millennium, nearly 40 years ago, even circuit boards had CAD files. So people used to work on the computers, which were fairly new in those days, designing the layout of circuit boards, and that would be with all the layers in it, and they'd be sent off to a manufacturer, and they would then create from those files the circuit board. So that was already CAD. And of course, once you do that on those files, it has all the XY coordinates of where everything is. And from there, then starts allowing you to be able to look at how do you fit components to it? How do you make things happen on that board? Because we already have then some components, and we've grown from that. Initially in the 80s, it was very manual. Late 80s, we started introducing some new technologies, which were then called surface mount technology, which is really pick and place machines. And of course, once you have the CAD file for the boards, then that can feed into the pick and place machines for placement. And it just has grown from that. And we then apply that to all sorts of fields as well. It's grown, and we extended from there.
So if I jump to today, you've got the factories in Sydney and in China and New Zealand that are capable of making production runs of 2 or 100,000, you told me. So in the middle, there's a long journey. So tell us a little bit more about just the steps you took along this way, Christopher.
Well, I think a bit like we're hearing from Vanessa and Ty, we keep on looking and saying, how do we remain competitive? How do we do things better? How do we make the product better? And clearly you want to do that without adding a lot of cost to the process. And really progressively, what we've seen is technology's improved. That's always a big part of it. But also what we found is better ways of using that technology by linking things together. We want to eliminate waste, and whether that's in inventory sitting around, people doing things wrongly, not measuring things. So what we've done progressively is added to not only our pick and place machines, but we have then test machines where we're able to do electrical testing of products. We know we've introduced automatic optical inspection. We've introduced all sorts of what's called flying probe, which is electrical testing of components with flexibility. And that whole process has really evolved. So we've automated more and more of that. And as we do that, of course, it lends itself to link those things as well. So with our ERP system too, I talked about, and Vanessa too, about One Truth. So we link it all through a one ERP system. So, that means we always have people who have to do processes to move things to do, especially for small batches, but we have a lot of automation as well, and that helps us with competitiveness. So as we've done that, every board we now make is serial numbered, we trace it, we have logic in there so that if we're making different variants of products and assembling things, when you scan it, it'll tell you you're not allowed to do that, or you haven't done that yet, you need to do the previous step. So we can build all sorts of checks and controls into that. And what that's really driven, from our point of view, is really having very robust processes. So we've had people out of Europe, Germany, and US and other places saying they've never seen anything like that. And it's not by putting more effort in, it's by actually using the tools we have to be able to check what's going on, to manage what's going on, and to really control that. And so, in part, what we've been able to do then with our ERP systems is running our plants in New Zealand and in China as well. We have one big box which runs the ERP system, and we virtualize them. So effectively, it doesn't matter if they're with us in Sydney or in China or in New Zealand, we're able to do the same processes. And what we develop in capabilities and processes, we're able to transfer very easily. And even for jobs, we might do some small prototype runs in Sydney, which people want to run in China later. We can do that by just diverting the supply chain and then moving that to a delivery address to a new place. So it's really grown in that. I think it's interesting, in software, people do everything online. It's all digital. When it comes to manufacturing, there's a lot of human involvement as well. So it's really how that evolves with people, how they engage with that, and how that actually becomes a tool to help them rather than something which makes it meaningless.
I think the flexibility point you touched on there is extremely important, the flexibility of the Australian factory. So can you tell us about the technology that gives you that flexibility in Australia that perhaps you don't see somewhere else?
Yeah, so I think by automating a lot of the processes, it means the unit cost comes down. But most important is really the whole issue of setting up a job and changing over jobs, because that's where a lot of work goes into, to document it, to trace it, to put the materials in place, to program machines. And again, a lot of that's been automated to reduce times. We've also done a lot of work in changeovers. So where it used to take 4 to 6 hours to change a job over, because you had to change the tooling, you had to change the machine, there's some ovens, you had to check the temperatures, and then we do a first off inspection, which we used to do manually. We've automated a lot of those things now, so we can do it in under half an hour. So at any one time in our factory, we'll have over 180 jobs running, and different jobs. And some of them, as you say, will be running in thousands, some of them running in units. And that's really, again, the tools enabling us to do that without, by bringing up through the software in ERP systems, by looking at the tools we have in the machines, bringing up the programs, being able to do things very quickly.
So you're able to look at your factory in China or New Zealand or here as if it's the one entity. They must have strengths and weaknesses compared to each other. How does Australia compare to China in terms of the things you can get them to do?
it's interesting. A lot of people say to us, so when do I move to China, or when do I move or keep it in Australia? And what I say to people is our China plant has a lot of flexibility, but the people there are just, they're very hardworking. The productivity is very good, but they're not as flexible in terms of their training and education at a shop floor level. In middle management, senior management, they are. So what we really say to people is, what we can do is, if the product is stable, in other words, we don't want engineering changes coming through all the time, because by doing that, it really creates chaos in the process. And if demand is predictable. So if we know that jobs are repeated again, then that's okay. But what China's not very good at is saying to them, can you do this next week? First of all, for importing parts, there's licensing and all sorts of other things you have to do. You have to manage duties and all sorts of issues around that. The people have to be shown how to do it. You have to set up and make sure they do it, and you have to train them to do that. So we aren't very good in doing things tomorrow. If you say do it next month, they're good at that. And whether it's a job of hundreds or thousands, they can do that well. We were able to ship from China into Mexico because the productivity of the people in China is much better than that in Mexico, but also because they have the tools to do that as well. So it really is a question of stability. If small jobs and unstable, then Australia's much better at that. If they're more regular jobs, which are predictable, then often China, and there's a lot of labour involved, then China helps. There's some jobs which are pretty automated where it doesn't make a lot of difference.
Thanks. I just want to ask one last question. Vanessa mentioned her parts storage, but you mentioned to me a very interesting thing about parts sourcing now in your electronics field. Can you talk about that a bit?
Well, the industry is really very much a global industry. We source things around the world and fly things around the world because they're small and have relatively higher value. And so part of that, what happens, especially in the last few years with shortages, is we're able to go online and see where stock is worldwide through all the distributors. They all now set up with APIs, which is really access to their computer systems to be able to see what it is. So we can sit behind a desk and say, here's a particular component which is hard to get. Where in the world can I find it? And 30 seconds later on the screen, I'll have all the distributors and where I can find it, what their prices are. The challenge to that is that many of them are not genuine, or they're buying it from each other. So you have to be careful and look at which are genuine channels. But the advantage of that really is it gives flexibility to be able to respond very quickly to different demands around the world. It means the pricing of components really around the world tends to be fairly similar. So whether we make it in China or in Australia or in the US, the component pricing is similar. So it really comes down to how effectively you can manage things in terms of timeliness, robust processes to make sure that they work properly every time, and the flexibility to be able to respond quickly to demand.
Thanks, Chris. Ty, if I could turn back to you again. You're a very fast-growing company. I think you've told me it's 30% a year, and you're really not struggling, but you're juggling this fast growth. What's the role of technology in that, and how are you managing this fast growth?
Yeah, it's a good question. In some ways, we managing all of it, I think we're probably not doing a great job of that. A lot of the times you're literally juggling and just trying to keep up. Like if I use the example of just Evolve, for instance, that business had sort of done the same revenue for the 14 years worth of records that we saw at the time. We've now more than tripled that, and we're at the constraints of the amount of electricity we can bring into the street for that to that particular premises. We couldn't have done that without the digitisation that we have done in that facility. So that the early adoption of bringing digital manufacturing into that business allowed us to actually achieve that growth. We couldn't have done it without it. There's no two ways about it. So, to Christopher's point around supply chain management and being able to bring in multiple components from all over the world and bring that into a business, that couldn't have been done on whiteboards with magnets and Excel spreadsheets. So, with Plungy, for instance, we set that factory up in Dallas through a contract manufacturer to start with. And we did that during COVID. So the team had never met each other physically, face to face. People were running around with iPhones and GoPros literally strapped to their heads, trying to train these American guys and girls how we did what we did in Australia. And that led into the development of what we call the Plungy Playbook, which is literally digitizing everything in the entire business, starting with the manufacturing processes, but then going through everything down to customer service and the way we manage and do our marketing. Again, we couldn't possibly have done what we've done with Plungy in the States without doing that. And we won't be able to do what we want to do with Plungy going forward and opening up multiple factories across multiple contract manufacturers all over the world without adopting that digitization of that business. I see it as both an enabler, but also a control thing that it allows to go after that growth. If we were growing 10% year on year or whatever it might be, that'd be fine. But in the first couple of years of Plungy, we were sort of 300-400% year on year. It's allowed us to actually achieve that growth.
So what would you say your digitization wins and perhaps misses have been in this time?
Probably cover the wins off in about 10 minutes and have a much longer webinar if we want to go over all the misses. But look, I think, again, it's about the right sizing. If you try and literally bite off everything that all of the potential providers out there throw at you, you'd be destined for failure, I believe. So you've got to pick off the right stuff that makes the right amount of sense and the right amount of cost at the right time, and what your current team and I guess outsourced service providers can actually deliver in a reasonable time frame, because you've still got a business to run. So it's not like business as usual can just stop so you can go after this massive digitization piece. And look, I think I think the misses, I believe all the businesses still struggle to use all of the features that are in the actual system itself. I'm sure Rade and the SoftLab guys would probably come up against that all the time, where there's customers saying, this isn't working, and then you actually scratch the surface and the guys just aren't using the system properly. Or you're still finding people still using workarounds. Like, I guarantee if we walked into any of our facilities right now, there's probably still some Excel spreadsheets being used off to the side because people find it easier just to go off and use that. So making sure people are complying is actually really important, making sure they understand that this is actually going to make their job easier, even if it seems slightly harder for a period of time. And I guess the other misses are, getting to the point where as much as you try and push everything into one single source of truth, realizing that, in different businesses and I guess in different verticals, even within some businesses, you might not be able to push everything into a fully digital solution. So accepting that and trying not to sort of push a square peg round hole, because sometimes you'll just force things and break things for no necessary reason. So I think that realization and making sure you make the right decision for the business at the right time is actually really critical.
So I know you're looking towards a capital raising of some sort in a reasonably near future. And you've given us a bit of an idea of a template for your technology expansion, the Plungy business expanding from Australia to Texas with the same playbook. Is that your next step in the digitization journey, more of this harmonization, as it were?
Yeah, I think in Plungy's example for sure. And there's other things that if you really adopt that digitization again, potential investors as well can also see that as a really key part of the value in that business. So it does, if you adopt it and you execute it really well, it can have a marked a material effect on the valuation of the business as well. So you're not just a company that produces big lumps of concrete or bits of plastic. Having those really strong systems and processes, and which then make sure you're driving corporate governance and all these other things, it can really help. Look, I think continual investment in the right bits of technology and the right kinds of businesses is an important thing, both from a management point of view, but also how you're going to access the right types of capital going forward. Plungy's got a big piece, which I don't know if it's been released just yet, but we've done a lot around our carbon footprint, and we're also getting a lot of our customers coming to us asking about how we're demonstrating what our actual carbon footprint or carbon savings are. We had a meeting yesterday with a new business that we're a new business and new technology we're launching. and being able to actually demonstrate what the lifetime carbon, the LCA is on that product and the effect for them, and actually being able to give them digital reports about that has a huge value to them, because they're a multi-billion-dollar company, and if they can save 0.5% on their interest rates, so us bringing digitisation into one of our products is actually helping them in a way that we would never have thought be possible, and that all comes down to having that sort of digital reporting in the business.
Thanks, Ty. Vanessa, if I could turn back to you for a moment, and talk about how you personally, perhaps in the business, have used technology to make the product appealing to the market, to get out there and tell the story. So could you talk about that, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So, look, as humble manufacturers, sometimes we get stuck into the work out there on the factory floor, and we forget how special it is, the things that we're doing. So it was really important for me to make sure that we are conveying that story, because Dad would say, if you make a good product, the customer will come. But, that might have worked, definitely 80s, 90s, maybe even early 2000s. But that was part of my journey to how do we capture the heart and soul of what it is that we're doing, because we're not just making taps. We feel that we're doing a lot more. A lot of love goes into it. So how do we convey that, and how do we back that up with what we are doing in our factory? So, look, like you, Ty, a lot of the demand coming from the market was to show the actions that we were taking. So we're actually world first in becoming carbon neutral, both our business as well as our products. So we're very proud of that, and that helps architects to specify in our products. But of course, that also comes from the investments that we've done with the PVD technology. That all adds up to help us to become carbon neutral, and that all ties in with the digital story. So it all works hand in hand to get us to that point. I can't remember what your question was, however.
How did you make the product appealing? I think we can start perhaps more basically than that, Vanessa, with the website and so on.
Yes, of course. And then conveying that story, Peter, making sure we're getting out, what is our mission? What are our core values? What makes our product different to others on the market? Well, what's that secret sauce? What's that special? Why would someone buy a Sussex tap over somebody else's? So absolutely, having that website, having that presence online with your social medias, and staying relevant in that game is something that's key to staying alive on that digital web space. So doing that and matching that, because we make a beautiful product. Yes, it's manufacturing. Sometimes it's dirty work. There's oil on the floor, and there's machine and brass shavings around. But how do we get that out to market as the beautiful product it is? So that's something that I enjoy doing.
I think you mentioned also social media marketing and so on like that, which you're obviously quite on top of with the story that you're conveying. In many ways, you've got a number of different customers, though. One of your main customers is Reece, so essentially that's a distributor. So how do you get the market? How did you get the story across to them?
Yes, and look, the market's getting, end consumers are more and more educated now with shows like The Block. We're finding that the end user is really educated and know what they want, and even know about the coding options that are out there, which wasn't really possible 10 years ago. And that's due to that online information that's so easily accessible to the end user, and again, critical to staying relevant and keeping customers informed. So yeah, look, we're very fortunate to work with the best customers in Australia, and working in hand, again, keeping them updated through, when there's order confirmation. If there's a delay with the order, keeping the customer up to date is so important for that peace of mind and that trust building exercise. And look, I think post COVID, we're only now just normalizing and ironing out the creases, and it really made us shift our focus from being more of a reactive model to a proactive model. So we've had to fast track some of those things that we took away. It was a painful time, to be honest, but it was fortunate that we were based here and we were an essential service, so we stayed open, and we've done a lot of work these last couple of years in our digital journey. So
what's your next step in digitisation?
Yeah, I think our business, optimizing our business intelligence systems. I think that's the future evolution for the business. I think we've got the nuts and bolts in place now, And then how do we optimize that data? Where are the bottlenecks coming that will get that visibility that, with Excel spreadsheets, you might see that 1 month down the track, or you'll learn the hard way when there's a backlog in the system. So it's about optimizing that information so we can see it from our computer. It's magic, really, when you think about it. And you say, right, that's my next bottleneck. That's my next problem. I've got to communicate that to my customer now. So I think that's the next step for us, Peter. Never ends.
So, Vanessa, I have renovated many times, and I know your types are of a quality that would be, I would say that's an international quality product. So it's probably a quality you get from Europe. So is internationalizing the next stage of digitisation?
I think, once the business is in that fine-tuned space, we have got the capacity. Who knows what's coming next? You've got to think big and plan big. But we're firmly in Australia across about 450 stores here in Australia and New Zealand, and we've got great retailers that we work with. And it's a niche, high-end product, so business have to keep growing. So we'll see what's next, Peter. Very exciting. I won't give away too much.
Thanks, Vanessa. Christopher, back to you. In a way, the things you were talking about, which you've implemented in your business, it seemed to just fall one after the other. That was sort of Industry 4.0 before we heard of it. Did that come as a surprise to you, this term, when you first came up?
There's lots of terms, or Internet of Things, or the industrial Internet of Things, lots of terminology. And I think it's really people packaging things and being able to display to people how you can actually integrate factories. So sometimes when you have a terminology around it, it helps people think of the whole process from row to go, rather than just thinking of individual parts of that. But yes, we've been doing it. And, because we've always looked at being in business overseas as well. And the advantage of that is it really shows us what competitive means. We're always under the gun, as it were, to make sure that what we do is the quality is good, that their responses are good, that the pricing is good. And to do that, we had to keep moving. As a contract manufacturer, we haven't got the luxury of saying we have a product, this is good enough, let's step back. I don't think anyone has that really, but it's less so, because all the time we have customers who are pushing us to do something better, to move, to do things. And we've really got to get ahead of that game. So people come to us because we've done it already, not because we promised to do it if they come to us. So we have to try and understand what's coming next. And we do it incrementally. So in our shop floor, the process people, the engineering people, the management teams, that if you talk to them, they'll tell you what they're working on now to try and improve processes. We're even looking at things like artificial intelligence for some of the documentation, which is a routine process we do. And I'm not talking about the bleeding edge of that, but really simple sort of ways of documenting things. We have customers, and the way they give us documentation is so varied. And sometimes it's a poor PDF document showing what the parts list is when it's all smudged and crooked. So we're looking at ways of being able to scan that and everything else and reformat that effectively into better formats. We can automate that as well, because at the moment we have people handwriting, copying, putting into a spreadsheet, scanning it, doing all sorts of things. And you can get away from those things. So yes, we continue to do that. We see Industry 4.1 just as talking about really that, of the fact that everything is managed in a cohesive process. We've put in workflows for new product introduction for sales and all sorts of things, so that the tasks get done and allocated to people as they come. If there's an engineering change, that has an impact, for instance, on if there's a change of a resistor on a board. That means the supply chain have to know they have to have a new part. It means that the people in the factory have to know you have to program the machines differently. You have to test it differently. And the pricing changes. So it goes through all the different functions. Whereas we used to have a stack of folders with all those things and pass them around and try to find them. Through workflows in our ERP system, we can now do that and process that very quickly and track how things are doing. So it really does help the processes do it well. And as I said, our industry happens to be one where it lends itself to that as well. But we do try to keep ahead of the game a bit.
Thanks, Christopher. I think you've answered my last question, which was how do you stay ahead of the curve? I can see where you're going. Just one last question. Yours is a particularly responsive industry to the types of business being done in Australia. Are you seeing any uptick in business in the types of electronic products manufactured in Australia, this onshoring we've heard about?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, others talk about onshoring more than we have seen it. What I've seen is really a lot of new companies starting up with ideas and taking them to the market, and many of them then succeeding in doing that and growing in that regard as well. And I'm not sure why that is, but I think in part it's because in the last 10 years, money's been fairly cheap. So lots of people have invested in new ventures, new ideas. So historically, electronics was about computers and communications, your laptop or your desktop and your phone. Nowadays, we see it in all sorts of applications. We do a lot of work in agriculture. We do it, obviously, defense is an area where it's growing, where people want sovereign capabilities. We make parts for satellites, which are flying around the world. I give a return to base guarantee on that. If you give it back to us, we'll fix it if it's wrong. But we see it also in things in automotive, in Internet of Things. People are measuring things everywhere, and that lends itself to all sorts of capabilities to apply electronics to it. So it is very ubiquitous. And we see many different companies starting. I haven't heard of half the companies we're dealing with 10 years ago. And as I said, some of them are doing remarkably well and getting funded. It's exciting to see that.
Thanks, Christopher. Well, with that, we're coming towards the close of our webinar on your digitisation journey. We've heard a lot today. We heard from a quality and design-led Australian business, Sussex Taps. We heard from a fast-growing group of companies in Queensland, Evolve Group and Venlo Holdings. And we heard from Christopher, Australia's largest manufacturer of electronics, GPC Electronics. I'd like to bring the conversation, though, back to Rade Bogdanovic of SoftLabs. Rade, you've been listening to the discussion today. What are the main things you got out of it, and what will you take away?
Yeah, thanks, Peter. I mean, it was an awesome conversation for an awesome panel for sure. Hearing all these real life experiences and stories is really important, and I've taken lots of notes here. Look, I mean, it aligns with many things that I've seen in the market so far in all these different areas and regions where I worked in. So I would say, going back to something that Vanessa mentioned, I think it's very important. It's not about really, only technology being thrown back at the business and, business digital transformation is achieved. It's really about, trying to redesign or restructure your core of the business, which is, as Vanessa rightly said, it's your IP, it's your differentiation in the market and so forth. And trying to really understand how you can utilize, digital tools to help you really keep up with, change, this very fast pace that is happening, around us, and also how you can bring back more value to customers and business in the same way. What I was seeing so far, and again, working with many customers, key drivers that you see in the market today are definitely coming from customers. Customer behaviors changed dramatically. And, there are different levels of expectations. There is a different level of engagement with these customers today. Technological change is another one. And it's very difficult to keep up with that. It's very difficult to stay competitive. Business models, again, I mean, not to mention the big ones, whatever, Uber and so on, but I mean, they definitely changed the landscape, the business landscape forever, and brought up, took the game to the next level. And of course, I mean, social impact, carbon neutral, that's been mentioned a few times in our conversations and so forth, what we bring back to the community and to the, back to the people. So I think looking at some of the key enablers at SoftLabs, we see 6 key areas, and obviously cloud computing is being the fundamental one. I was hearing today lots about ERP being the central points of truth, which is the reality in many situations, and combined with cloud computing, it's already the digitisation journey is already then started. Automation is a big one. I've had that as well a few times now, streamlining the processes, trying to really understand, where this automation can take place, how this automation can really optimize the business in the best way. The next few points I think are equally important, and it's about data. Big data is a big challenge these days to many organizations to really harness the wealth of information that is there, and to use it and reuse it in either marketing activities or back into the process. Cybersecurity, not to mention, I mean, we see lots of that in the market these days, and it's becoming a huge challenge to many organizations, both on IT and OT side. So, that's a really important topic. And then the last two would be IoT, which is the nervous system of this whole structure. We mentioned a few times an AI, which is definitely emerging technology that is going to probably in very near future define the success of every organization if it's not used and utilized. And finally, I've identified through my work basically 5 steps for some kind of action if organization is really taking this journey. And I think first and foremost, it's a strong strategy vision that organization needs to have, and it has to be accompanied obviously by a strong plan. The second one would be, and we can see that among our panel members, there is a strong buy-in. Executive buy-in needs to be there, and it needs to be streamlined back into the teams. Third one, and I think Ty mentioned that, which is choosing the partners well. I think you need to choose external partners or parties well. You need to make sure that you are comfortable in working with these people, that they share the same vision, that they can really take care of the that side of the business and help you with technology. In manufacturing world, you don't have ability to really look after technology and help from that side. You don't have skills. In some instances, you don't have enough people to look after that. So, reliance on third parties is big. It's very important to do that, to do that carefully. And then I think we mentioned a few times as well, look for the quick wins, look for the processes, look for the parts of the business which can be digitized as in low-hanging fruit. This process shouldn't be longer than a year. They should come back with some strong ROIs, and it should really justify itself very quickly, not only from that ROI perspective, but also it will instill lots of confidence in the team and organization to continue with the growth with the digitization. And finally, the last point is really the cultural change that needs to happen in every organization. There is that saying of learn, unlearn, and relearn, which is basically, constant education of people. That's changed. We've had some examples where the businesses were around for a long time, and how different it is now. And obviously the digital tools are bringing lots of possibilities for innovation. So innovation has to be really embedded in the culture of every organization these days. And look, that's all for me. I would like to thank you again for the opportunity to be part of this panel and webinar. It was a great experience and great hearing from all the panel members. If you would like to discuss more with me, please reach out to me. I'm on LinkedIn, or we'll provide, I'm sure, contacts, and I'll be more than happy to connect with everyone and talk more. And with that, I'm handing back to Peter and, for final thoughts and closing, I guess.
Thanks, Rade. We've had quite a few comments and questions coming in from readers. I'm sorry we haven't really had time to get around to them today. Our format's not really allowing that, but we'll certainly get back to some of those people who've sent some things in. Thanks very much for that. Well, there's nothing left for me to do but thank our panel, Vanessa Katsanevakis, Ty Hermans, and Christopher Janssen, and of course, Rade Bogdanovic. Thanks to SoftLabs who made the webinar possible. Do reach out to them to discuss your own digitization journey and how they can help. So with that, it's goodbye from me, Peter Roberts, and to those watching at the office or at home, many thanks for joining us. With that, I'll close the meeting today. Thank you. Thanks to all the panel again, and goodbye.